Good morning and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of March 26, 2024. We'll begin this morning by taking attendance, and I'll turn it over to our General Counsel, Mark Silberman, to call the roll.
Chair Carroll,
Here.
Vice Chair Blaney, Commissioner Chapin, Commissioner Chen. Here. Commissioner Chu.
Here.
Ginsburg. Here. Commissioner Goldblum. Here. Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Lutfi. Here. Commissioner Master.
Here.
All right. Welcome again to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public hearing and public meeting of March 26, 2024. This meeting is being held in person at in our hearing room at 1 Center Street on the 9th floor. It is also being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel if people would like to participate or watch remotely. We have a fairly short agenda today, but a number of important items. We'll begin the morning with a public meeting agenda for 2 applications that have already had a public hearing and are returning today with revised proposals in response to our comments at those public hearings. And then we'll move to our public hearing agenda to review new applications for work on designated properties. And with that, I will turn it over to Emma Waterloo, our Deputy Director in Preservation.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We'll begin today's agenda with Preservation Department Public Meeting Item Number 1, docket number LPC 24-01927, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 499, Lot 36. This is 107 Spring Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, a frame building built prior to 1808. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs. It was last heard at the public hearing agenda of October 17th, 2023, and no action was taken at that time.
So, Marcello, are you presenting this or is the applicant? Okay, so we need to make a motion to open the proceedings. So Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the applicant may speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for hearing this application today. My name is Jackie Pudu-Vallon, JPD Preservation Consulting. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm by Zoom today. Okay, so yes, as stated, this is 107 Spring Street. It's on the northwest corner of Spring and Mercer in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I'm here today with Jacqueline Rajolia of Overall Murals, also via Zoom. At the hearing in October, many commissioners were not comfortable with the size and placement of this painted wall sign. Therefore, the sign has been divided into 3 smaller signs with their tops aligned with the top of the lintel of the storefront window at the corner, and also featuring a trompe-l'oeil effect wood grain frame painted as its border. So rather than the usual solid flat painted border you see, where the applicant is trying to create a 3D effect with the border looking like a wood frame, as you can see in this inset image. So the sign itself would be, I'm sorry, this is the previous sign you saw in October. And this is the proposed. Each sign would be approximately 6 foot square. This is the current condition of the wall. The sign company has been maintaining the wall even without a sign there. So they've continued to paint over the graffiti that keeps appearing on this wall. I just want to briefly address the history of this building. Again, this building had been the home of the Manhattan Sign Company for many generations. So therefore, we think that the installation of these series of signs with a faux painted wood frame would be in keeping with the history of this building, where you can see there previously had been signs affixed to the building. Probably these were probably painted canvas signs that were stretched on wood frames. This was also a typical condition of the district, which I described in our presentation in October, where you had a plethora of, at sidewalk level, large signs on buildings. So the criteria for the master plan, it would be a 2-inch border painted, in this case, in the trompe-l'oeil effect, again, to look like an unpainted wood frame, contrasting with the content within approved signed square footage, no regulation to content of the sign itself as recommended by staff at public hearing. The term of the master plan would be 10 years. The exposed wall is approximately 1,700 square feet. The signs themselves would total approximately 100, I'm sorry. The exposed wall is approximately 1,700 square feet. The signs themselves would total 170 square feet. The proposed signs are less than 10% of the total facade area. And just to give you previous proposed and current proposed renders, here's one looking at it from the sidewalk, diagonally across the street, and I believe, and one from across Mercer. And that's our presentation, and we look forward to your questions and comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicant? Okay, so we'll go ahead then and move to our discussion. And so as Jackie presented, this was an application for a painted wall sign, and it was before us, a master plan for a painted wall sign, and it came before us because under the rules, the staff can approve painted wall signs following this criteria we established on undeveloped lot line walls of buildings in this district. And this was a little bit different because it's a corner building, and so it's on one of the street-facing facades, not a lot line facade. And so, and also its location at the ground floor. The applicants presented the fact that this building actually was the home of a sign company and had lots of signage on it, and that it is an altered building with a kind of minimal and sort of stripped side facade. So at the time that we saw this, I think none of the commissioners present were open to the sign that was presented at that time, the large sign. But given the history and the sort of stripped nature of the facade, I think some commissioners were open to three or some smaller signs, maybe up to 3. So we'll begin our discussion and see where we land. So Commissioner Goldblum, I think you actually last time said that maybe 3 smaller signs could work, but I think it depends.
I said it must be true, so.
But I think it was all sort of still needed, to be seen to understand if that was going to work.
I find the notion of a faux wood frame a little bit tricky, but I think the idea of a frame or a border is generally what we ask for, and I think that the scale of this is much less billboardy and much.
Okay. And Commissioner Chapin, I think you were possibly open to smaller signs.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of wall signs in general. This one I find it's odd because it's on the, first level, the storefront, and usually that's not where you find, this kind of sign. So now it's sort of like presenting like a vitrine almost. So I'm not sure what to make of it. If it were like a vitrine, I think I could accept it. So, but I'd like to, I guess, hear what others think about this. It's
Thinking about the vitrine idea, I guess, does it sort of activate the facade the way windows might, store windows? So that's maybe a way to think about it, that just your thought made me think of that. Okay, we can go
you.
around.
I'm not sure what I think.
That's where you're going.
Yeah. Oh, so is it, so,
Yes,
yeah,
Master.
I think it's much better, breaking it up. I think that the scale is better. and it doesn't overwhelm the building like the previous billboard did. And the other thing I wanted to comment on is if you don't have something on this ground level, you're going to be subject to graffiti all the time. So I think this is a big improvement over what was. And I think it keeps it as a cleaner building. So in practical aspect, I find this appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I think that the change of scale is the biggest impact that I'm seeing in the new proposal. I am interested in that thought because if I look at the elevation, it does feel a bit cluttered. And if those were the proportion of the windows, I could imagine 4 of them and it feeling a little bit less sort of collaged. But I do think that the smaller scale helps a lot in terms of its impact at human scale.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
So I agree with my fellow commissioners that the initial proposal, as we all thought, was really overwhelming. And in terms of proportions, and it just didn't make sense on so many levels, almost assaulting. I really do like this idea of having the proportions change so that they really speak to the size of the windows, but I'm not so sure we need 4 of them. I would still keep it at 3.
Okay, Commissioner Chen?
Well, I tend to agree with most of the comment. I have less problem with it. I think that just like Commissioner Mastro and Michael, I think given the pedestrian scale, walking on a street by breaking it up and the proportion of it, I compared to the last presentation, I can find that appropriate.
Commissioner Ginsburg?
I agree with at least most of my fellow commissioners. I think the previous billboard scale was very out of scale, and this works fairly well and is much more the pedestrian scale that is appropriate. And I agree with Commissioner Master about the fact that it's better than the graffiti, at least most of the time.
Agree on that.
Sorry,
Yes,
can I just
Commissioner
make
Chu, go
one
ahead.
comment?
Yep.
I would echo Michael's comment. I do not like the faux wood frame, and I think just having a contrasting, frame of that border is sufficient.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Chapin, do you have any other thoughts now?
It's quite unusual, but I think, as I said, I can support it in this version. If it were really like a traditional wall sign, I would have a problem with it at this level, but I think I can support it.
But support it as is, or if the proportions were restudied with staff, maybe?
I go along with the majority on, no.
Okay, and I think they don't necessarily have to be the size of the upper floor windows, but maybe look to the other storefront window. Yeah. Okay, so why don't we make a motion to approve it with the condition that they study the proportions with the staff to better relate to the storefront?
Regarding 107 Spring Street in Soho Cast Iron Historic District, the application is to establish a master plan governing future installation of painted wall signs. I note buildings, style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that there is photographic evidence of abundant wall signage to the building, given its historic use as a sign manufacturing facility. That painted wall signs are a traditional method of advertising that was historically found in this historic district. Therefore, the proposed signs will be in keeping with the historic character of the streetscape and the evolved commercial character of this historic district. That the painted application of the signage will be in keeping with the traditional application methods typical of the district. The signs will include an outer frame that recalls the details of historic framed and paneled signs of the building. That the placement and size of 3 signs will help them relate to the scale of existing storefront openings and remain a subordinate presence at the building and in the streetscape, regardless of the type of graphics or number of colors used within the body of the sign. At the vendor tag will have a set location and size, and the proposed master plan will be valid for a period of 10 years, and the applicant will document every sign approved under the master plan so that there is a record that the commission can consider when reviewing effectiveness of the master plan criteria. The applicant will work with staff to adjust or modify, examine the proportions of the individual signs such that they relate better to the existing first floor fenestration.
And I think they can also work with the staff on the color of the border.
And
Okay. Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second?
All right. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. We'll move to the next public meeting item.
The next item is public meeting item number 2, docket number LPC 24-07291. An application for a miscellaneous amendment in the Borough of Queens, Block 8043, Lot 49, 115 Park Lane in the Douglaston Historic District. This is a colonial revival style, bungalow style freestanding house designed by Norman McLason and built in 1914. The application is to legalize construction of additions and related alterations completed in noncompliance with Certificate of Appropriateness 06-9207. This was last heard at the public hearing of September 27th, 2023, where the commissioners took an action to address several of the items, and the applicant is back to address the remainder of the items today.
Morning, Commissioners, Lisa Schaefer, Preservation Staff. In September, we legalized some of the work that was done on this house in compliance with the Certificate of Appropriateness. And at that time, there were 2 items that you did not legalize, and we asked that the applicant propose modifications and come back to present them. The 2 items are the expanded paving in the driveway, which you felt was not in keeping with the amount of paved area typically seen in the district. And the other item was raising a portion of the roof on the rear facade and installing a large arched window, which you thought created an awkward relationship with the other fenestration on the rear facade in terms of the size of the opening and the individual panes of glass. Here we go. The 2 photos on the left are the existing driveway, and the 2 photos on the right are what the driveways looked like prior to construction. The house sits on 2 lots, and there were 2 driveways, 1 on each lot. The site plan on the left is what was there prior to construction with the 2 driveways. And the one at the bottom here is what was approved under the Certificate of Appropriateness. And the upper right is the driveway as it was constructed, showing a green area where they're proposing to plant grass to reduce the size of the paved area. And this is just a photo montage showing where that green area would be. And at the rear facade, this is what was originally approved, which was a pair of French doors with a balconette. And then on the left, on the right, is what was actually constructed, which they raised a portion of the roof and installed a large arched window. And then at the lower right is what is being proposed, which is to modify the opening so that the head and the sill will align with the other windows at the second floor, and the size of the panes of glass will also be consistent with the other windows. And these are just photos showing prior to construction, the small arched window that existed in that location. And on the right is what was constructed. And then the photo at the bottom is showing the visibility, which of the rear, which is visible over the garage of the house on the other side of the block and is only visible seasonally. And that is the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Are there any questions for Lisa or the applicant? Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I just want to be clear, for the driveway, are they reducing the driveway to create the planted area, or are they just creating the planted area?
They are creating the planted area on part of what is currently paved. So they're taking away some of the pavement.
Okay, and then the other, I couldn't tell from the drawing, are they getting rid of the arch at the top because that's dashed in?
Yes, that will
Okay.
be eliminated.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Goldblum. Okay, any other questions? All right, so I think if we don't have any other questions, we'll move to our discussion. It does look like we did get a letter from Historic Districts Council continuing to maintain its recommendation of denial, which was shared with you all in advance of today. So as Lisa said, this is a project where we saw a number of things that were done in non-compliance with a permit, and we legalized many of them, and some were addressed at staff level, I believe. So there were two remaining issues. One was the width of the driveway. So the commission did not approve the wider driveway. And we also had concerns about the proportions of the Palladian window at the back. And so the applicant is coming back today to reduce the width of the driveway by removing paving and putting in planting and giving it a more sort of curvilinear shape that I think is closer to the original. And then at the back with the Palladian window, it's being modified to be a square window that will align in its head and sill with the adjacent windows and is only seasonably visible over a garage. So you're sort of seeing it, but you're not really seeing the whole rear facade, even at the maximum time of visibility. So we'll begin our discussion on these two components. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you like to start this one?
But and I don't think I was here when this first came. So, but I think the window in the back is fine without the arch. I'm just concerned looking at this now, the approved driveway area was 65 feet, and the proposed is 1,755. And yeah, they reduced the width, but they could be cutting out some of the back. And I'll be curious what the other commissioners have said, but I would personally like to see less paved surface.
All right. And I would say for the back, I mean, it historically went back to a garage. So sort of paving in the back, I think was seen as less of an issue than the width, but we can definitely see how it goes around.
Right. And
Okay.
again, I'm coming in having not been here
Yeah.
before. But that just is
Understood.
my initial reaction.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I have no problem with the back. I think now that the applicant has eliminated the arch, at the top portion. Obviously, in the front, the more greenery, the better, especially historically in this neighborhood. You have a lot of greenery as well as, the porous surface being absorbed the stormwater. But I tend to think that if since they did it mostly in the front, that is where it matters most. So I defer to the rest of the commission if they have problem in the back.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
I think the change to the back window is approvable, and the adding the greenery in the front of the where the driveway is, so there's a more natural curve works as well. I mean, I think Commissioner Ginsburg raises a good question that's worth, looking at from our perspective. I appreciate the fact that it's not visible, but it could be a lot of paving. So I'd like to hear as well.
Twice the amount we approved, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Chu?
I think that the window vision on the rear is fine and appropriate. I think that the driveway looks like an improvement. The visible landscape area will be slightly increased. I do echo my fellow commissioners in just the quantity of impervious surface that's on the lot. And if that can be reduced, that would be preferred.
Okay, great. Commissioner Master?
Yeah, I agree that the window, removing the arch is fine. And I think that when they increased the greenery, I think that made a big improvement. So I'm okay with the way it is proposed.
Commissioner Chapin?
I think that both of these changes have made it, such that I think we would have approved it initially. And I'm not particularly troubled by the amount of paving in the back, because I think you're more focused on the front in the district there, and it's, typical to have garages and other emplacements in the back. So I don't think that amount of paving is a problem located as far back as it is from the street and from your view. So I'm okay with it as presented.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree with Mark. I think that 30 feet for a turnaround more than generous. I think that they could take it back to the line of the left edge of the driveway and just keep it straight there. It would more than double the green that zone. It would still probably leave them over 25 feet, which, unless they're driving motorhome.
Okay. All right. So I think we can go ahead and approve today with the recommendation that they work with the staff to reduce the amount of paving further. Okay.
You'd like me to go
Yes,
ahead? Yes.
Commissioner Ginsburg, thank you.
With regards to LPC 24-07291, 115 Park Lane, Douglaston Historic District, a colonial revival bungalow-style freestanding house designed by Norman Glashan and built in 1914. Application is to legalize construction of additions and related alterations completed in non-compliance with Certificate of Appropriateness 06-9207. I note that the building style, scale, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the architectural and historic character of the Douglaston Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that replacing the portion of the driveway paving with grass will create a more balanced relationship between paving and planted area for the site that is more typical of historic districts, that eliminating the arch from the window opening below the dormer on the rear facade and aligning with the sill and lintel and matching the pane size of the other existing second floor windows will create more harmonious relationship between the window and the rest of the rear facade fenestration, and that the raised dormer at a portion of the roof above the window to be modified, which is on the rear facade and only moderately visible from a public thoroughfare, will recall dormers found on other buildings in this historic district and will not detract from the building or the streetscape. However, I find that the paved area can be additionally reduced, and so working with staff, I would ask the applicant to reduce the paved area.
Not
Thank you. Commissioner Chan, would you second that motion?
Second.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that's approved with the condition on reducing the
And-
paving.
and
Thank you.
Commissioners, can I just ask
Yeah.
one thing? So a couple times commissioners have said, have sort of made it, have asked the staff, the applicant to work with staff. The point is they're directed to work with staff. Okay.
Okay. All right, we'll now move to our public hearing agenda.
So public hearing, agenda item number 1. This is docket number LPC 24-05386, application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 190, Lot 42, 239 Dean Street in the Borum Hill Historic District. This is a modified Italianate-style row house built in 1852, and the application is to construct a rear yard addition.
So before we start, I want to introduce Fred Metzger. He's been with us now several months, but this is his first public hearing item. So you'll be seeing him for the first time. And some of you may know him or recognize him as he formerly worked at Rick Cook's office and then went off to the West Coast and has come back to New York. And we're lucky to have him now at the Landmarks Commission. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. Fred Metzger for Preservation Staff, presenting 239 Dean Street. Trying to present 239 Dean Street. How to forward the
Oh, Jared, do you click on the screen? You should be able to, and Edith should have transferred it to you. So it should be, you click on the screen and then move your arrow.
Yeah, you have control.
Great, thank you. This is going great. Sorry.
Every debut should have some drama to it.
Apologies for that, everybody. Sorry. So our first slide, this is the district map. You can see 239 Dean Street between Bond and Nevin in the Borum Hill Historic District. On the left, you'll see the block plan. The reason that we're here is that the block has less than 50% rear. The homes on this block have less than 50% additions. Also to note on the block plan on Bond Street at the end, there is an empty lot. So we did ask to see a mock-up to assess the visibility. But you'll see on the right, the block is heavily planted. This is a view in the rear yard showing the mock-up at the correct height and depth, marking the corners. And the views from Bond Street, looking over that low fence or at the empty lot, and we did not detect any visibility, so not visible from a public thoroughfare. These are a couple of views of the other additions within the block. And this is kind of a close-up of the directly adjacent, so you'll see a couple of the additions across the way out there on the rear of the buildings fronting Pacific. And in the lower left-hand corner is the proposed Dean Street addition. And to the right is an axonometric kind of showing the immediate adjacencies. The proposed materials, red brick, matching mortar, black windows, gray stucco, bluestone, and a wooden fence. And a photo collage in the middle. An existing rear elevation showing a previously approved deck and stairs and doors and the proposed addition. And then a section existing and proposed showing the extent of the proposed addition. We have Jess from the architects office here to answer any questions.
I'm Jennifer Jesse with Studio DB, and I'm here to answer any questions. I will say before the questions, just want to point out the addition is 15 feet 3 inches in depth. Initially, we were playing around with going a bit deeper, but there's a large pin oak in the backyard that we wanted to preserve. We did an air spade investigation and found the depth that we could go with still preserving the root system. So we really wanted to be thoughtful and sensitive to the existing nature in the backyard.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions?
Yep.
Yes, Commissioner Chu.
What is the lot depth
The lot depth is 100 feet.
and what is the remaining lot after the addition to the existing?
I believe it's 45 feet.
45 to the lot line.
I can double check.
Okay, Commissioner Ginsburg.
This is a deeper addition than the other additions I can see on the block. Was there any practical reason you needed that additional depth?
We were looking at the plan. The proposed space is really important to the client, driving kind of the usage of the house. We tried to step back a bit, but once we started going back a few feet, we felt that it really compromised the function of that space. Zoning wise, we could have gone much deeper, but again, we wanted to really respect the tree in the backyard. We feel that even though the immediate adjacencies are not as deep as what we're proposing, there is a language of deeper and taller additions in the vicinity. So we thought that proposing 15.3 was not a huge ask as far as what's existing.
And do you know how deep that addition is immediately adjacent to you?
Yeah, that's 11 feet.
Okay, so that's 4 feet shorter. Okay.
Sorry, and you said that there was how many feet from the addition proposed to the lot
I
rear?
think I got that mistake.
Yeah, it sounded too much.
So it looks like we had, the existing is 42 on the 100 lot, and then we're asking for 15 more than that. So I would say about, yeah, I think it is about 45.
Sorry?
I think it is about 45 feet, actually.
Does the front of the house sit on the property line on the front?
No, there's about.
Yeah, so there's a setback.
Yes,
So then there's another,
something,
you have to
yes,
take off
correct.
that too. Okay, I think you need at least 30
You need
to
at
meet
least
code.
30.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
But it sounds like you have more than the required 30. Okay.
And so the depth of the other additions on your side are, if you could just repeat that.
So the one immediately adjacent to our property is 11.
Uh-huh.
The one further down, I believe that one was approved in 2018. That one's 10 feet.
Mm-hmm.
There
And the-
are some properties, the one that is 10 feet is actually higher than the one we're proposing. And
Right.
there is, if you see across the way at the top of the page, that addition there across is 18.
Mm-hmm.
So it is deeper than the one we're proposing.
Okay. And it looks like in your sort of white diagrams that the additions immediately behind you are slightly less deep than the 18-foot
Yes.
addition. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right, let's see if we have public testimony. I'll note that there is no one in the room to speak on this item, so I'll turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have one hand raised in the attendees list, that being Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds the scale and bulk of this addition appropriate, but we find the proposed glazing inappropriate. We ask that the applicant re-examine the proportions of glass to masonry, which may also help the applicant refine the proportions of the proposed muntins. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised in the attendees list, so I will note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommends approval, and I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, so we've heard support for the mass of the addition, the volume of the addition. There were some comments about the fenestration. If you'd like to respond to that, you can.
I mean, we've looked at this. We feel like the language is in keeping with the additions to the opposite of us. They also have significant glazing. We did play with the proportion, adding some more brick detail as far as corbelling at the top around the opening itself, just to break up the mass itself. But we feel like what we're proposing is respectful of the existing.
Okay, all right. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we'll begin our discussion. So this is a two-story rear yard addition that is 15 feet deep with I think it must be a rather large lot for there to still be more than the required 30 feet. We often are approving additions that leave 30 feet. And the applicant has shown some of the other additions within the block, some that are taller and less steep, some that are shorter and less steep, and some that are taller and even deeper. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Chen, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, this one I would defer to the majority. I think that, to me, I know that it's taking out a few feet more, but I would defer to the majority to see what the sentiment is.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
Less than 50% of this donut has additions, and I think that's something for us to consider. So my sense is that the addition should not exceed 11 feet. And also, I do agree with the comment we heard that the banding on the windows needs to be increased, or maybe it should be brick so that there's just a little less fenestration.
I would say it's not visible, and we have tended to be very flexible about particularly at the first two floors on rear yard additions, and have approved many such multi-light configurations.
Well, I can, let's see what everyone else says, and I can go along with that.
Okay. Commissioner Chu?
When I look at the block, I in agreement with Jeannie in terms of the existing condition here. There is not a lot of rear yard additions in this donut, which is beautiful. And even thanks for the image, you can see how green it is. And in fact, the applicant has reduced their addition because they were trying to respect a large tree. And I think that is a statement in itself, which I think is good. I'm looking at the mass of the addition in terms of its, let's say its footprint. If I look at the rest of the additions in the rear yards here, 18 is the largest, but it is not the full width of the lot. It is a narrower proportion in terms of footprint. So I do feel that it does feel a little imposing, and I'm just concerned about the future of more and more and more additions here. So I would like, what I would say is I would feel comfortable with it meeting the furthest 13-foot projection on this side of the street and retaining its full width. So reducing it a couple of feet from its existing proposal. I don't have any issues with the design materiality or elevation. It's purely the size.
Okay. Commissioner Master?
So I think that the scale and the massing of the two-story rear yard addition is fine. I actually think that because this donut has so much green space and that they didn't go to the maximum, that they were allowed to, I still think it's very modest, and I'm fine with the 15 feet that they're going out with additional.
Okay. Yeah. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I think the design of the window is fine. It's appropriate. I think there's enough detailing of both the window and the surround that you know, it's not atypical of things we permit all the time. That's my opinion. On the extent that it extends into the backyard, it is beyond some of the others, certainly. But I think because it's a very long backyard, atypically so, that I can actually, like Commissioner Master, accept that it is extending farther than its neighbor. So,
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum? Commissioner Ginsburg?
I'm with Commissioner Chu on the 13 feet, but the 11 feet would obviously be fine if that's where we get a majority.
I considered going for 13.
All right. And so Jeannie, is the 11 feet is hard and fast for you?
I mean, I think it's flexible.
Or, all right, Commissioner Goldblum, and I'll ask you the same question. Would 13 be okay?
It's okay for Jeannie, it's okay.
Okay. All right, so we'll approve it with the recommendation that it be reduced to 13 feet. Commissioner Chen, would you make the motion?
A matter of LPC 24-05 386 239 Dean Street, Borum Hill Historic District. The application is to construct a rear yard addition. Noting the building style, scale, materials, and details among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Borum Hill Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed rear yard addition will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, that other rear yard additions with a similar height and depth exist within the block, and that the proposed two-story rear yard addition will be modest in scale and will not overwhelm the building, adjacent buildings, or the block's central green space, that the proposed red brick cladding and the multi-light metal window and door assembly will harmonize with the existing rear facade, and will be in keeping with other rear additions found throughout the historic district, that the proposed work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building and the Borum Hill Historic District. However, I find that the proposed rear addition extends further than other additions within the row, and therefore we recommend that the rear addition be reduced to 13 feet to be more aligned closely with other rear extension within the row.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Master.
Aye.
With 8 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Right, it's approved. Thank you.
The next item is item number 2, docket number LPC 24-06747, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 487, Lot 8, 375 West Broadway in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a neo-Grec style store building designed by J.B. Snook and built in 1875 to 76. The application is to construct an elevator bulkhead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name's Adrian Figueroa. I'm an architect for 375 West Broadway. And this project's basically elevator extension for the passenger to meet ADA accessibility for the rooftop terrace that's there. Hang on. Sorry, it's completely off now. The building's located in a cast iron historic district, was created in 1979 in the lower Manhattan. It is bounded by Canal Street, Broadway, Harvard Street, Crosby Street, East Houston Street, West Houston Street, and West Broadway. 375. Construction commenced in 1875 and finished in 1876. The architect was J.B. Snook. Builder was Edwin Harrow. Owner was Lamard Estates. The use was for stores for tobacco. The facade is brick. How can I move? The facade is brick, stone banding, cast iron, storefront, and cornice. It's a 5-story building with 6 bays. The site is located right here. It's here. West Broadway comes north-south this way. This is the Broome Street that goes straight, and Watts turns towards the Holland Tunnel. The existing addition is on top, and the after is on the bottom. So there is an existing elevator machine room, approximately 6 feet 6 height from the terrace here. You can see it also on the right side. We did a mock-up of the actual elevator extension, which would be 25 feet 10 inches height. There were 3 options that were contemplated, and we chose option A, which is having an elevator machine room on top, and that's why it is 25 feet 10. And from across the street, this is our building, and here's the extension. You can see part of it here sticking out. That's directly across. This is from the corner of Houston and West Broadway. Again, you can see the extension, and we have a little blow up to make it easier. See. As we cross the street on Broome and West Broadway, you can see part of it again, And as you go further on Watts Street, this is Watts and 6th Avenue. You can still see the extension peeking out in between. Cool. Okay, good. This area here is on Canal Street, even though there is no foliage on the trees that will block a lot of the highlight, you can still see it sticking up. And this is from Spring Street, north of the building. You can see part of it sticking up a little bit. And we did analysis in the area where we found, as we walked through the streets, different areas that have elevator extensions or rooftop extensions. So we can see one here on Worcester, a couple on Broome, way down here on West Broadway, and even across the street from us, there is an extension, and diagonally across there are 3 extensions there. And then up on Broome Street right before Sixth Avenue. And these are those extensions that we see. We have arrows so you can see them all, make it more clear. And so the neighborhood has a lot of these rooftop extensions. I guess is indicative of the time when there were no elevators, and we had to put in the elevators, they had to come above. So this is a rooftop terrace that was designed about 4 years ago, but it did not have any accessibility. So this project, not by me, another architect, is on hold until we do an elevator extension for accessibility. So this is where we're having the elevator extension. This is the egress path. This is the existing plan now. We plan, there are steps here and steps here and steps here. We didn't want to do an elevator opening here that will add more stops and all. So what we decided to do was to fill in this area here and provide handicap accessibility to this level. So by doing that, we brought up the elevator height 10 more inches because of the 2 steps. This is the before and after. So this is existing, that's there. And here is our elevator extension, which added another 19 feet, 4 inches to make a total height of 25 feet 10 to the top. This is just details of what we're doing. So on the back side, there is brick here, and then it's cladded in gray metal cladding. So what we plan to do is continue the brick on the back side as veneer to match as close as possible to the existing structure, and then clad the rest to be consistent to what's been designed before. This is a section looking from the, an elevation looking from the terrace area. And you can see this is the existing elevator bulkhead, and this is our extension here. This is the front facing south, and this one is facing west. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So I have a number of questions. Sure. First of all, the roof terrace isn't required. It would be amenity that the building likes, and hence, but once they put that in, they have to make that accessible. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Second question. Did you look at a machine roomless elevator?
I brought my elevator expert who could talk on all these points because I'm not.
Thank you.
So I did look into a machine roomless elevator.
Can you identify yourself for the record,
Oh,
please?
sorry, Joseph Cariello. Yes, I did look at a machine roomless option. One of the challenges with that is we have front and side openings. And so you have corner post rails. So that there's a lot less options for corner posts. So what I did was I did like a little bit of a custom design by using a lot of the existing equipment that was there. And I was able to do it, but the savings, because I wasn't able to access the machine, I'm sure you know the hoist machine goes at the top of the shaft with the MRLs, and I wasn't able to access it from the car top because of the code, New York City requirements that it has to be at least 6'6" or less from the top of the car. I wasn't able to make that work, so I had to put an access platform in at the top of the shaft to access that hoist machine. So at the end of the day, it came out to 4'10" less than what the original design for a typical overhead machine. So we were saving something, but there were disadvantages to using this type of system.
Thank you. And then I have a,
If we use this carless elevator, we had to put a crawl space on top to access the machines and service the machines, which we felt was a bit unsafe for our workers. And also, it was a new system that you were proposing.
Right.
That's not been tried and tested.
It's very customized, yes. First time we would be using this type of thing.
And also, can you talk about that was option B, option C, can you talk about that?
So the other option that we looked into was a hydraulic elevator, which is typically used for a lot less travel than what we're dealing with. We have 80 feet of travel, and I have a lot of experience with, problems with using hydraulics for that amount of travel. So that was a big factor, and that would also require a complete rip out of the entire elevator system. So basically, this is not a brand new elevator. This is a modernization and an extension. So we're trying to avoid the complete removal of all the elevator equipment. Additionally, we have a shallow pit here, because we know with a lot of the old elevator systems, they have shallow pits, which doesn't allow for the code minimums for current codes. So we would need to excavate the pit. We have concerns about what's underneath that pit, possible water or things like that for the hydraulic system. And it's mainly just the reliability and the having to rebuild the whole shaft. Hydraulics also have higher horsepower motors. This may require an upgrade of the electrical feeders because they're not counterweighted. So there's a lot of disadvantage to using
How many floors is the traveling?
it's seven stops with the
All
basement
right, so you're like at the edge of hydraulic.
with high floor heights.
I have one other question. There seems to be only one means of egress from the roof. Would the code require two?
You are right, but there are actually two means of egress, and I'm going to show you the second means of egress, which is here. So we have a door here, the steps coming down, across,
Okay.
and that's it.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Lutfi.
I'm just wondering, how old is this elevator?
How old is the elevator?
Yeah.
So the elevator was actually partial. They did a full
Gotta find the perfect spot. Yeah.
They did a full modernization of the elevator about 15 years ago. So about 15. Right, but some of the parts are original. So that whatever, I don't know how old. Yeah, so some of the parts are actually like the rails. Some parts are original, but the major components are state of the art. The hoist machine, the controller, all the moving parts were replaced about 15 years ago.
Is it possible to do a machine room on the side?
So what this gentleman was talking about before is partially, you do move some of the equipment to the side, but the main component, the lifting mechanism, the motor, hoist machine, what we call a hoist machine, has to be directly over the shaft. Right, and so the concern with that is, safety first and foremost. So,
Okay.
I have one
Commissioner
more
Chu,
question.
yep.
The fifth floor is the last floor before the roof, correct?
yes.
And what is the fifth floor? What's on the fifth floor?
Office space.
Yes, the building is mostly comprised of two tenants. One is square, which takes from second to fifth, and the bottom floor is Gucci. And the cellar, also some storage for Gucci.
Did you ever look at an option where you could exit on the fifth floor to a small space that takes you up a Lula elevator, which can easily travel that distance without any impact to size, mass?
Yes, the previous tenant, not previous tenant, the previous architect, when he did the rooftop terrace, he looked at doing a Lula in square space, and Square said no. The lobby that we have, get to. So we have a lobby that enters into the elevator here, and there's a small lobby here.
Right.
And on the other side, there is a freight elevator, which also has a small lobby. And those two lobbies weren't big enough for a Lula to be there. And the tenant Square did not want to lose space.
Okay.
Yeah. It's for the whole building, yes. Yes.
More than half.
He's also a tenant.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Chen.
So what would happen if you were to eliminate or lower the terrace in the front?
Then we wouldn't need the elevator.
Sorry, I'm trying to process that. So the additional 10 inches that if you didn't,
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's what
Yeah.
you were asking.
Were you asking if the rooftop terrace was eliminated, would I need an elevator?
Lower it to,
Yes, we could lower this and we would just have to meet all the ADA requirements. Yes, we can. 10
and
inches.
that will make how much of a difference?
It would go from 10 to 25.
It's 10 inches.
It's just 10 inches.
Right.
I mean,
Let's see if we have any. Yeah, do you have another question?
no, it does not.
All right.
Or 15, exactly.
Any other questions? All right, let's move to public testimony. Is there anyone in the room who'd like to speak on this item? Noting there isn't, I'll turn it to Gregory Kalla to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a couple of hands raised in the attendees list. The first we'll be hearing from is Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society of New York. Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, founded in New York City in 1966, the Victorian Society in America is dedicated to fostering the appreciation and preservation of our 19th and early 20th century heritage. The New York chapter promotes preservation of our historic districts, individual scenic landmarks, interiors, and civic art. Now, we were very dismayed when we saw the new passenger bulkhead is to be extended 16 feet above the existing bulkhead and how visible this extension will be from several locations. Now, visible bulkheads in this district are not uncommon or necessarily inappropriate, but in scale, this is more a tower than a utilitarian bulkhead. Now, we're sure the designer proposed that this is the quote, best design, but we'll remind everybody that best is a word that can have many different interpretations. Now, to a building owner, the best design may be the most economical one, which meets code, but to a preservationist, the best design would be the one that has the least impact upon building and an historic district. So we must ask, if it's possible to offset the required elevator equipment and to reduce the proposed overall height, or if the code even requires elevator service to this roof, which already has an access stair, and no action should be taken until the applicant has shown that they've looked at alternative best schemes. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we have Lucy Levine from the Historic District Council. Lucy Levine, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. Given that this building is situated in a historically industrial district, HDC feels that mechanical accretions, such as an elevator bulkhead, are consistent with the history and architecture of the district. We are therefore not opposed to the fact that this elevator bulkhead is visible, but we do note that this elevator shaft is close to the roof line, which makes the bulkhead highly visible from the street. If it's possible to reduce the height of the bulkhead somewhat, we feel that would be most appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised in the attendees list, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval of the Worcester Street Freight to passenger elevator enlargement, and denial of the outsized enlargement of the West Broadway bulkhead due to its extreme visibility, and asks the applicant to return with other options, including but not limited to the exploration of offsetting the mechanicals after the question has properly been considered with the consultant. And I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, so I think that the testimony is echoing some of the same questions that we've heard, but if there's anything else you want to add or specific
Yes.
comments you want to address?
We did entertain Scheme B, which was an elevator machine room on the side. We went against it because of the crawl space that's required to service the hoist machines and all major components. We thought it would be a danger to the employees that will work on it. And since there've been many elevator fatalities in the last few years, we don't want to add to that. And this, having the elevator on the side was a new sort of machine room that was not tried and tested. And so we had concerns about that. And I know it's not important, but we were also worried about our insurance going up because of the risk factor of employees. And elevators do have maintenance requirements constantly. And so our landlord was very opposed to that.
Okay.
Can you talk about the safety part?
Yeah.
Right, so I have a lot of experience in the field. I've been, in the elevator industry for almost 30 years. So I have personal experience with, when doing upgrades or repairs or needing information about, fixing things, you'd be crawling around in spots that are very confined. And with this platform inside the shaft that we're installing to service it's only 4 feet 5 of height. That's what allows you to bring the overhead down. So it is a concern. It's just first and foremost, we went with the higher bulkhead just for safety, to have a fully enclosed machine room to work on and inspect the equipment. So it's all about safety for that
Okay.
option.
Can you just maybe, using that section, explain what it would look like if you did the machine room on the side and you did this crawl space for the maintenance? Because would you not be able to access the crawl space from the outside, the roof? I'm trying to imagine how that works.
Basically, what I would do is I would just bring this down. I would put a smaller hoist, more compact loader in here. And then I would put like a ladder going up on the side of the shaft. And then instead of having a concrete floor here, we have a metal grating, and it would only extend out to where the motor is located. So I would walk out, I would have a smaller door. I think the max height we could do was like 5 feet to the door, and we would walk in and we'd be standing on a platform here to service this. So basically, it's just a matter of when you change from inside the shaft to a full machine room, the code allows you to bring down, they call it a machinery space as opposed to a machine room. So you're allowed to go from 7 feet to the minimum of 4 foot 5. So that's what allows you to meet the lower.
Okay.
But even though the code allows it, there's definitely a faction of people that believe it's not,
It's not safe, and it's only 2 feet shorter, 2.5 feet shorter.
The only advantage is that you're bringing the people. No other advantage.
But bringing it down by 2.5 feet, or is that right, or?
Well, because the motor is also smaller, I can also bring this down a little bit, so.
That's a little bit
the
more.
total ends up being 410.
Got it.
Is that the machine roomless elevator, or is that?
That's what I was just talking about.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then just to follow up on the question of the freight elevator, where is the freight elevator, and is it not an option for getting people to the roof terrace?
The freight elevator, sorry. The freight elevator is right here. And we're also extending that, but that's only going up 2 feet. And it's not visible. We took it out of our package because we wanted to concentrate on the extension here, which had a major impact. This had no visibility at any direction. We took a bunch of pictures, Because it's set in and this, cornice, it goes on a steep angle up. You just can't see it. And this, Worcester Street is narrow. And when you come and remember,
But it's not an option to get to your terrace because there's too far of a distance to get to the front.
but. let
And maybe
me-
level change.
So we have all these, steel.
Yeah.
For mechanical, for rooftop. I have to actually crawl underneath this to get here.
Okay,
It's not an option.
all right. Other questions? All right, I guess we'll move to our discussion. All right, Commissioner Master, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so this is a challenging application. We have, they are using an existing elevator and extending it to provide access to this roof terrace. And they've walked through a number of options that they considered and that we've asked about. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi.
Sure, I'm the exactly correct person to start this since it's really not my area of expertise, but could we just go to slide 7, please? I mean, I think this is the issue. I mean, it's not, as you've heard, it's not that we're opposed in an area like this that's been, had manufacturing uses in it to have some accretions at the top. But if you look at the side view and the front view, it's it's just too much. And so I don't know what the answer is. And I'm hoping that one of my architecture colleagues will, have more to contribute here. I do think it's a little unfortunate since this is going to be an amenity for the commercial tenants, that they're not engaged in a way that would make it work, not only for them, but also for the community at large. So that's all I have to say.
All right, Commissioner Chen.
I think the difficulty here is obviously it's too visible and it's too tall. I don't have the answer to the solution, but I just think that one of the answers actually lies with the building owner itself. The solution is actually on the 5th floor. Given the safety issue that's being raised with
Right, Commissioner Ginsburg.
So, having dealt with elevators a bit, but an architect, not an elevator consultant, first of all, you don't have to do the roof terrace. There's nothing requiring it. So that's the first thing. You don't have to do anything. The second thing is if you do it, although I appreciate your desire to have a higher level of safety than code is required, I think we can lower this by more than 5 feet by going to a machine roomless elevator and lowering that deck by, was it 10 inches or so on. And so I would say that that is the minimum that we would require to be acceptable. And if you think it's unsafe, then don't do it. But as I understand it, it is code compliant, so the building department thinks it's safe. If not, looking at some other way to get from the top floor to the roof that requires less structure, even if it takes away some of a unit space or something. And then finally, I think instead of putting brick on the back, the whole thing should be wrapped in the metal.
Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree with what Mark just said.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin.
I also agree.
Okay, Commissioner Master
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Ginsburg.
and Commissioner Chu.
Ditto.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so I think where we are is we'll take no action today and we'll let you go back and explore the other ways to address the visibility and the height of this bulkhead, either by looking at closer at the machine roomless elevator and trying to deal with your safety concerns, or looking at some way that the owner can negotiate with the tenant who occupies most of the building on that, for some space on the 5th floor, to do a lula or provide other access. So we're going to ask you to take another pass. I don't want to take a specific action because I don't want to lock you into a certain direction if you can come up with another solution. So we'll have you back when you're ready. Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next item.
It's item number 3, docket number LPC 24-06861, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 568, Lot 4, 39 Fifth Avenue in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is an apartment house with Spanish Renaissance style details designed by Emery Roth and built in 1922. The application is to install a rooftop arbor and canopy.
Good morning, Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for your time. We propose an arbor on the penthouse terrace of 39 Fifth Avenue in 1922, Emery Roth built. These are just images that show the proposed location on the penthouse, which is at the rear of the building, not facing Fifth Avenue. Historic tax photo, three-dimensional axonometric of the penthouse, showing the proposed arbor in the rear southeast corner.
Can you please just state your name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Thanks.
Michael Haver. Just views of the front facade, historic facade, showing that the proposed arbor is not visible at all from Fifth Avenue. Again, some aerial context photos, detailed plan of the terraces with the proposed arbor location. I believe these renderings show it most clearly, where we're just planning a simple steel frame that's matte black to match the historic ironwork that we already have on the penthouse terraces. And that's also consistent with other details in the building. It will have a retractable canvas awning. It's just a simple off-white canvas. And these are images of the mock-up from the terrace. We're not anchoring to the roof, the terrace floor itself to protect the roof membrane, but we're anchoring to the parapet walls. We show those details, and then we show a whole series of, it is in fact visible from 11th and University and a little bit down 11th Street. But other than that, it's not visible from any other location on 10th Street or on 5th Avenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, any questions, commissioners? Let's see if we have, yes,
Question.
Commissioner Chu.
Did you, is it missing a fourth leg, so you're attaching to the facade of the building on two sides?
We're on the southwest corner. We can go back to that. Those images. Up on the upper right, we're anchoring it to the wall, to the chimney wall. So
Upper
really it
left?
has three legs.
Oh, sorry. Upper left or right?
Let me point. Oh, I'm sorry, upper left. Up there. So this corner, we're actually anchoring to the building facade, and the others we're anchoring to the parapets.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, and I'll note that there is no one in the room to speak, so I'll turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. If you would like to speak on this item, please click the raise hand button now so I can call on you. Okay. I do see that Christina Conroy, you are in the meeting and BSNY has signed up to speak. If you are with us, would you please raise your hand? Thank you so much. I'm promoting you to panelist right now, Christina Conroy. So please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the Victorian Society does not support this proposal for signage. First, we find it excessive. This applicant is asking for a total of 18 signs, including one vinyl sign on the display window.
Christina? I'm
Yes,
sorry. I believe you're reading testimony for the wrong.
I believe I am too. Okay, I'm sorry. I stepped away and I do apologize. Okay.
Is that
See you later. Okay, thank you.
okay? There's no testimony, I'm guessing? They did submit. We do have a CB testimony. They did send in testimony, which is confusing. I could summarize it if you'd like. Yes. Okay. And I will note also for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval, provided that the arbor is the color rendered and confirmed by the applicant, not the white stated in the application. And with that, I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
So would you like to address that?
Oh, yes.
Comment?
and
Yeah.
we proposed them at-
Okay. All right. So, commissioners, are there any final questions on this one?
Last one, how tall is this?
It is 9 feet.
9 feet above the terrace floors?
Okay. Any other final questions? All right, let's move to our discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so this is for a 9-foot high pergola and a retractable awning that's visible really primarily over the rear facade, over from a street beyond, looking back over buildings to the rear facade. And, we know we did not see in this presentation, but we've seen in other presentations that apartment buildings of this age, type, and style often had rooftop gardens and garden features, and some of them quite elaborate. So I think we have often found arbors and pergolas to be appropriate on this building type in the past. And so we can have a discussion about this particular one. Commissioner Master, would you start this one?
Sure. I think that this is very modest and that it's not visible from the front facade and minimally visible from the rear. And since we find pergolas commonly in this type of large apartment buildings, I can find this appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I think the scale of the element is appropriate. I have to look at it like furniture, essentially, and that's why I asked the question about attachment. I'm not totally comfortable without the fourth leg. I feel like you could easily achieve this design and have it a freestanding element that isn't attached like that into the existing building, which I think it starts to dilute its furniture feel, which I think is what makes it appropriate. So yeah, I would ask the applicant to look at a way of bringing fourth leg down.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
It's appropriate, and I actually think that Commissioner Chu's recommendation about the fourth leg makes sense.
Okay, Commissioner Chen?
I can find that appropriate as well.
Commissioner Ginsburg?
Agreed, appropriate.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
I agree with the previous commissioners. This is fine generally, and perhaps it can be tweaked, although it's Commissioner Chen's recommendation.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Master, would you be comfortable making a motion asking that they continue to work with staff to study that fourth leg? Okay, thanks. Not at this point, no. Do you want to, you can say something to Tim. Tim can speak to us.
Good morning, Timothy Shaw, Preservation Staff. The architect says that they're not allowed to penetrate the roof for waterproofing purposes, and that's why they're attaching to the parapets and the walls. So I think it may be a building rule or requirement for the
Okay.
building.
But either way, it's on the it would be on the inside face. So I'm not sure you
Yeah.
perceive that attachment from the street, right?
Probably not.
Okay, so maybe we can study the feasibility of it. Okay.
Okay. In the matter of LPC 24-06861, 39 Fifth Avenue in the Greenwich Village Historic District, an apartment house with Spanish Renaissance style details designed by Emery Roth and built in 1922. Application is to install a rooftop arbor and canopy. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the installation of the proposed arbor and canopy at the penthouse roof will not alter or damage any significant architectural features of the building. That the arbor and canopy will not be visible over the front facade and will only be visible over the rear facade from East 10th and East 11th Streets, and will be seen in the context of other rooftop accretions on this and other buildings in the roofscape. That pergolas on terrace setbacks of large apartment buildings have historic precedence and are common features in this historic district. Therefore, its presence on this apartment building will not call undue attention to itself. And that the proposed materials consisting of black painted steel for the arbor and a canvas canopy will be in keeping with the utilitarian rooftop accretions found on other tall apartment buildings in the historic district. And that the applicant work with staff to study the feasibility of dropping the fourth leg.
Second.
All right. John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi, Commissioner Master.
Aye.
8 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
The next item is item number 4, docket number LPC 24-06015, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 501, Lot 12. 138 Prince Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a modified Romanesque style warehouse designed by Henry M. Cogden and built in 1879 with a later extension built in 1894. The application is to install signage and privacy film.
Good morning. My name is Carla Samama. I'm here on behalf of Studio Superette. With me today is my colleague Eric Barasa, who is the architect of record. This is for 138 Prince Street. So to get you situated, this is located in the corner of Prince Street and West Broadway, pictured over here in the corner. These are tax photos, so the building has seen a small amount of change, but we want to call your attention to the enlarged pictures on the right, which showcase a sign in between the window arches and the decorative brickwork at the top, and on the bottom you can see that it goes past the decorative brickwork, so that'll be relevant for later. Some recent photos with the previous tenant, French Connection, where you can see the existing sign bands as well as some film around the transom. Oh, thank you. Can you all hear me now? So the vinyl signage over here at the transom for French Connection and the existing blade signs throughout the two facades on West Broadway and Prince Street. Some recent photographs of the entrance spaces, calling your attention out also to the storefront on Prince Street over here, which is not original to the building and not really in keeping, historically speaking, with the design of the building. And lastly, some photographs from afar so you can get a feel for the building's design. This is our ground floor plan for what we are proposing to be a new jewelry store on the corner of Prince Street and Broadway. The thing we want to call out your attention to, programmatically speaking, is that the second section over here is the area of the store where you can go for private appointments to make a custom ring. Part of the reason for that is that there are just concerns about security regarding high-value items like diamonds and engagement rings and things of the sort. We tried to put all the back of house and private program as far away as possible, but the waiting area for this is facing Prince Street. So looking at the elevation side by side to each other, you have Prince Street and West Broadway. To zoom in a little bit closer, starting with Prince Street, what we are proposing is a pin-mounted sign that's also halo lit, centered in between three windows, in between the archway and the decorative brickwork. As well, we're proposing one digital display at this window over here. And we are proposing to reuse all the existing bracket signs. And over here, you have the Prince Street storefront, which is enlarged over here. And we are proposing a gradient privacy film, which essentially is opaque at the bottom and becomes translucent at the top for privacy and security concerns. The transom over here, the glass is divided into two, and it's a pretty unsightly storefront, generally speaking. So we think concealing it would do it some favors. And the transom would have an opaque film on it because it has two fins at these little metal clips. For West Broadway, we're proposing something similar. There's a pin-mounted sign centered in between these two windows over here with the exact same placement. And at the two different entrances on West Broadway, we're proposing one digital display in front of each entrance, as well as some vinyl signage at each of the entrances to explain the store hours. So looking at this in section, you can see that all the digital displays and the display cases are 18 inches from the window. And looking in section at some of the signage that we're proposing, we are proposing to reuse all the armatures and propose a simple ring concierge sign with just a logo on it. And for the pin-mounted signage, we are proposing to put it in between the edge of the arch of the window and the decorative brickwork. This would also be mounted to a rail to minimize the amount of penetrations inside the brickwork. And originally we had it at 18 inches tall and it was covering up the decorative brickwork, but we worked with staff at the LPC, which deemed that it would be more appropriate to stay away from the decorative brickwork, though we are open to changing that design how you see fit. And lastly, some renderings to get an understanding of what this all looks like together. Looking at the corner over here, you can see the pin-mounted signage at each facade, as well as the existing bracket signs that are being reused. Looking at Prince Street first, you can see the pin-mounted sign centered in between the three windows, as well as the digital display at this window, two existing bracket signs, and the film at the storefront of Prince Street, which we will see a closer rendering a little bit later. For West Broadway, a similar approach. We have three blade signs on that facade that we are proposing to reuse. One pin-mounted sign centered in between these two windows, and two digital displays, one at each entrance, pictured over here and over here. And lastly, some vinyl signage at the door to express the store's store hours. Looking at this a little bit closer, you can see that this is the pin-mounted sign. One thing we wanted to call out that is not pictured in the rendering that was really difficult to make in the render is that there is some decorative brickwork along the arches of the window. What we are essentially proposing is to leave this decorational brickwork alone, which stands proud of the building, and to mount the letters in between over here. Part of the reason we wanted to do this is because, as you saw in the tax photos originally, the signage originally was placed on Prince Street in between these two, and on West Broadway, it went past the decorative brickwork. So our thinking was that, all the windows that are historical to the building are, left alone for the most part, while the Prince Street storefront has a bigger intervention to it. For the digital displays, you can see them in the window over here. They don't go all the way to the top. They would likely display some sort of imagery with jewelry on it and maybe some text. And lastly, we have the storefront at Prince Street, where we are proposing the gradient film, which is more opaque at the bottom and translucent at the top, so that you can still get an understanding that spatially the space continues. Because this storefront is not original to the building and was added around the 80s, we think this would be a nice way to cover up the fact that the storefront is not in great condition, especially in real life. That's a little bit more apparent that it's wearing off. There's some rust, and these fins over here are very, very visible, which is partially why we wanted to apply some film to conceal that. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, yes, Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, could you just describe what's the main entrance and what is the hierarchy of entrances?
Oh, absolutely.
In other words, for the public, not for employees or what have you.
Yeah.
And also, is there what looks like your main entrance does not appear to be accessible, so you have something that you intend to use for accessible customers.
Yeah.
People don't need, access. And I don't know whether the bespoke entrance is a separate entrance for customers, or that's just showing that you have a bespoke thing which can be accessed by other entrances. So if you just walk around, then that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So on West Broadway, you have the two main entrances into the store. So this would be the main entrance people are using, and there's two on West Broadway. Those are not ADA accessible. However, Prince Street is already at street level, so it is it has ADA access there.
So the two entrances on Broadway, you do plan to utilize both entrances, or no? I mean, in other words, a customer comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Which entrance, do they enter both entrances, or one of them is really the main entrance and the other is,
My understanding is that for security purposes, they would like for people to enter and leave mostly on this entry over here on West Broadway.
Mhm.
But because ADA access is on Prince Street, there's easy access into the store at this door over here.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ginsburg.
On slide 14, there are a series of what look like white columns out on the sidewalk. What is that? There.
Oh, they're what do you call them? They're like posts so that you can't drive into the sidewalk. Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
But,
bollards, yeah.
okay, is that there now?
To my knowledge, yes.
That's not in the.
I'm just gonna
The-
interject, Eric Brass, architect record, from Solicitor Spread. There's a number of trees that aren't shown there, and we took them off because you can't really see the signage as much. At the white boxes, those are planter boxes. The bollards are not fully to scale here. They're actually more like 24 inches, and they're all existing. Nothing is proposed in the sidewalk.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Lutfi.
There's, digital signage, there's display in the window, there's brackets, there's the pin mounted signs, there's the bracket signs, there's these little RC logos over the entrance doors, there's vinyl. I just would like to know, I don't know if I missed something, but if you could go through each one and tell us how many of everything there are?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, I'll pull up an allocation that shows both. Okay, so the bracket signs are all existing. There are 2 on Prince Street and 3 on West Broadway. So that totals 5 existing bracket signs. We have 3 digital displays, 2 on West Broadway and 1 on Prince Street. So 3 in total. And then we have the vinyl signage. We have it at each entry doors and on Prince Street. So that's 3 instances of vinyl. And then we have 2 pin-mounted signs, 1 on West Broadway and 1 on Prince Street, given that there's so much coverage facing the street.
And sorry,
Yeah.
the pin mounted signage is halo lit, but the
Yes.
bracket signs are not.
The bracket signs are not. They're existing as is. They're not to be lit up, just the pin-mounted sign.
All right, Commissioner Goldblum, sorry.
The digital displays? Yeah, there's 3 in total, 2 on West Broadway. Yes, they're about 18 inches away from the window.
So, and just for some context for you, the rules that allow staff approval do allow for LED screens to be 18 inches behind the windows. And as long as they're not 50% of the glazed area, the staff can approve them, but we can certainly consider them as we look at the cumulative amount of signage. Okay. Or we could, look at it, we can include them as we look at the cumulative amount. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see if we have any public testimony. Noting that there is no one in the room to speak, I'll turn it over to Gregory to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a couple of hands raised on the attendees list. So first we'll be hearing from is Christina Conroy from the Victorian Society of New York. Christina Conroy, I'm promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the Victorian Society does not support this proposal for signage. First, we find it excessive. The applicant is seeking for a total of 18 signs, including 1 vinyl sign on the display window provided with gradient film, 2 vinyl signs on transoms, 2 illuminated pin-mounted metal signs, 3 digital displays, 4 bracket signs, and 6 display boxes. Now, these last are to be set 18 inches behind the existing windows in the location which the Commission doesn't typically regulate, but which we feel must be included in the total count. We'll also note that the bracket sign rules stipulate 1 bracket sign per establishment, or for a corner storefront, 1 on each facade. The applicants state that there are 4 brackets already in place, but since these are modern additions, they should not be considered grandfathered. We ask that the total number of signs be reduced and that this reduction include at least 2 bracket signs. And finally, the 2 illuminated pin-mounted signs are not appropriate in the proposed locations. The LPC signage rules state the installation of signage will not damage, destroy, or obscure significant architectural features or material of the building or storefront. The applicant is proposing that pin-mounted signs be placed over or near beautifully detailed brick arches, which are character-defining features of this Romanistic style building. The applicant's computer-generated drawing doesn't show this outstanding brickwork, so we'll ask the commissioners to please look at photos on board LM004, which does. Now, these 2 signs architecturally fight with, cover up, and likely will physically damage these brick arches, and they should not be approved. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we will be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC supports the bracket, digital, and vinyl signage proposed for this location, but we find the proposed pin-mounted signage over this building's arch windows to be inappropriate. Not only does the pin-mounted signage interrupt the building's detailed arch brickwork, but also it obscures the arches themselves, which are integral to this building's legibility as a beautiful example of Romanesque Revival-style architecture. As such, the pin-mounted signage is inappropriate because it compromises the stylistic integrity of the building. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends denial of the pin-mounted signage and recommends that the applicant reconsider both size and placement of the signage in order to not compete with the decorative brickwork and arch windows of this beautiful Soho building. Approval of the vinyl signage indicating store name, hours, ADA access, and approval of the gradient vinyl in the Prince Street storefront. Denial of the opaque white vinyl in the transom of Prince Street, and denial of round-the-clock usage of the digital monitors, and asks that the commission limit their use to business hours and that it applies any allowable restrictions on level of illumination. And I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. And so just to sort of clarify some of the things that we heard in the testimony, and there was a lot of discussion about the rules, and I just want to remind everybody that the rules are established or adopted to authorize the staff to approve certain types of work. So everything that comes to the full commission by definition doesn't meet the rules. So the fact that something doesn't meet the rules doesn't by default mean it's inappropriate. But we look at it outside of the minimal criteria that are in the rules that delegate the work to the staff to determine appropriateness, and we vote on that. And then with respect to the limiting of the usage of the screens, I think that is something that historically we found we cannot enforce, and so it's something that we have historically not regulated, but we do regulate size, placement, location, and as I said, if they are 18 inches behind the glass and less than 50% of the glazing, they're eligible for a staff level approval. But we, as we look at the cumulative effect of all the signage, we can consider their presence in that context. So with that, I'd like to ask if you'd like to respond to other comments that we've heard. I think many of them were about the pin-mounted letters and their relationship to the arches. I don't know if you want to spend a little more time talking about that.
Yeah, I think we're amenable to work with what we feel is appropriate. I think by no nature are we trying to put a heavy hand on it. It felt really from the archival photos and from looking at, we could have done a better job documenting it, but there is some scarring in the building, recalling those original tax photos, which are much larger than what we're proposing. You know, the building is a little bit challenging. It doesn't have the typical spandrel sign band that you often see, that it makes an obvious answer of, you know, how do you distinguish the storefront presence? Because look, if you don't brand a store, it's confusing to everyone. I think it's confusing where the entries are, and so I think that's why the staff has done a good job of making guidelines that are that actually work. And in that sense, I would just kind of question, well, where do you put a sign band on this building? It's an architectural question that I'd ask for guidance on, because we need to make the space not confusing, and you know, our job also as architects is to respect the architecture that's there. So I think we're trying to do both of those things, but this is as far as we've gotten.
Thank you. Any final questions, commissioners? All right, so we'll close the hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chu, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as we've heard, this is for exterior signage on including bracket signs, halo lit, pin-mounted lettering above the arched openings on both street facades. It also includes some vinyl signage in the windows. And at the storefront, which is a storefront that dates to the 1980s, a gradient film which then is opaque at the transom. And as we discuss the appropriateness of each item, we also will think about the cumulative effect of all of the signage that is being proposed at this site. So Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I think that the applicant, unfortunately, that actually the plethora of signage on the building is not leading in the direction they would like to lead, which is to try to, avoid confusion and help their customers. So it seems to me that, with regard to the number of blade signs, that the blade signs ought to be located in each case at the actual entrance they want people to go into, because otherwise, I know when I go up to a building, I'm looking for, where do I go in? What's the right entrance for me? And I think you want to signal that as much as possible. I think that the blade signs are pretty close to the entrances they want to use, so that makes sense. I don't know if it could be closer or different or whatever. Someone else may have another suggestion. I don't have a problem with having the pin-mounted signage on both sides of the building because it's kind of long, and I think if you want to have the accessible entrance is going to be on a different side, I think it's maybe a good idea to have, the signage there. I think with regard to the vinyl signage, that again ought to really be associated with the principal entrance and not have additional vinyl signage, because I think that'll just be confusing. So what I would recommend is trying to just take the signage hierarchy and, attach that basically to what they're trying to do, which is get people to their principal entrance on one side and the other, on each side, on the Broadway side and the Prince Street side. And I think if they did that and just didn't use additional signage beyond that, that would work, pretty well and reduce the amount of signage. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Okay, and just one thing to sort of to ask you to think about a little bit. The 5 bracket sign armatures that exist were commission approved, and they're proposing to use them. And so I know it's logical to put them near the entrances, but what do you think about the fact that it might involve removing something that would then have to be patched to create new holes somewhere else?
I think it would look better to take them off. I think they were no doubt installed originally because you had multiple tenants, I'm guessing. I mean, that's probably why we permitted 5 signs, because they have multiple tenants. They have one tenant, so in this whole area, in effect. So at this point, it's not really necessary. So that's kind of what I would think.
So remove some, but not necessarily shift if it's going to cause more damage.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they need to be shifted, because I think that
Got it.
one is pretty close to the area where they want to have the accessible entrance, and the other is pretty close to the entrance that is the primary entrance.
Okay. Okay, got it. So
I wouldn't have a problem with shifting them slightly if that would help, assist people in finding where they should be going in.
okay, so removing some of the blade signs and vinyl signs, focus on the entries.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Master?
So my feeling is that the new tenant actually has the entire ground floor. So as opposed to multiple tenants. And I find that even though it sounds like a lot of signage, that the signage that is there is functional and is pretty modest in scale. You only have one pin-mounted sign along West Broadway and one pin-mounted sign along Prince Street. And you do need some type of a signage band along the street, to identify the tenant. The sign brackets also are modest. You only have 3 on West Broadway and probably 2 on Prince Street, and the size is minimal. the vinyl, I guess the vinyl on the window also has a function and a purpose, and I also think it's modest. And then the digital screens are also important because they really don't have a lot of other places to put information. So I'm actually okay with what they have. I find it very modest given the frontage, store frontage that they have. But I also understand and appreciate Commissioner Chapin's concern about highlighting where the primary entrance is. And I do feel like that it's going to cause a little confusion, but I'm not quite sure how to address that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chu?
I tend to agree with Diana about the quantity and variety. I think it's the aggregate that I feel is too much. And it's because they're all done with different approaches. And I actually think that for a higher end jewelry store, maybe less is more. I feel that the pin signs and the blade signs are two ways of signage that you could pick one or the other. That's my feeling. You can work with the blade signs and take the pins off, or you can do a revised version of the pin letters and take the blades off. There are other areas in the building that I think could be explored. I think the applicant asked the question. I think the one thing about this facade that isn't being portrayed, which is really characteristic of the brickwork, is the horizontal band at the arch springs all around and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful texture and shadow work. And that could become a datum for you to work with. There are blanker areas on the facade. I think the proportion's way too tight up there. You cover the brickwork, there's not even enough room, even if that ornamental brickwork wasn't there, and I don't want to hide it. Plus, bringing light there at night to me just accentuates an awkward, tight condition that feels not original to the building intent. So I would suggest picking one of the two approaches, and if the approach is the pin signage, which I can recognize an applicant would be more interested in doing because it is quite a visible corner, I would ask to look at another proposal of location.
Okay. Commissioner Lutfi?
Okay, I think my fellow commissioners have already made some good recommendations. I'm actually going to recommend that the applicant reconsider some things and just come back to us because they're starting from a place with so much going on. I think that they really, and I'm saying probably my last point first, they really might need to, once they hear everything, re-study the facade and think about what makes sense from a, I'm going to say the important signage that says, this is the store and the few accents. And then, what happens in the windows. I completely agree that, if you look at this rendering, the signage on the store looks actually squashed between, squashed between the arch of the windows and then the band above it. And I do think it's a shame that the detail would be obscured. I do want to point out, I think this is very important, this large store occupies a corner on a very important block and a very important corner intersection, and there is no way people aren't going to be looking at this store. So I think your concerns about needing so much are not necessarily warranted. I do think there are way too many bracket signs. And if you need them, then I think you want basically one on each side. I I think there's a very nice space between the windows close to the corner and the windows, like the two further in. That could be a very nice place to put a sign that doesn't really interfere with some of the architectural detail. I'm talking about your sign that announces what the name of the store. And I also feel like I know this, the digital signs can be approved by staff. I don't think you want so many of them. If you need any, I would have one, and I would put it in a very strategic location. I think Commissioner Chu made a good point where he said, it's a high-end jewelry store. If you think about the highest end jewelry stores in the city, everything's done with, I don't want to overstate it by saying a light touch, but I'm going to say an understated, elegant touch. And I think that's something you want to bring to what I would recommend being a rethinking of how the whole signage facade works.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I think the commissioners have made a lot of good suggestions, including Commissioner Chu. I'm in agreement that I think the applicant need to read. I understand the dilemma in terms of the store, and Jeannie also made a good comment about, what is their priority. On my personal level, I have a great deal of issue with the pin mounted sign. I think the bracket signs are fine. They're there already. The display behind the 18 inches, those are fine because staff can be approved. But I just think that the pin mounted sign will cause additional damage to the facade, and then, so we'll see if there's other way to mitigate this.
Right, Commissioner Ginsburg?
I agree with my other commissioners, there's too much. And I agree with Commissioner Chen, the choice of the blade or the pin mounted, I'd get rid of the pin mounted, but if there was some reason you had to keep it, then I'd get rid of the blade, but I'd prefer to see the pin mounted go.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum?
So I agree with generally the consensus, which sounds like less, and whether it's less based on choice, time, less pin mount, less move them. I'm okay with any of the above. I think that several things that I would just kind of directly set some parameters from at least my perspective is, number one, I view the bricks that are surrounds the arch to be decorative bricks, no different than horrible dog tooth thing at the spring line. So I think that the placement of the pin mounted lettering should avoid that decorative detail. I think that the idea of putting any surface mounted signage in the smooth areas and either above or below that dog tooth detail should guide. I think it's okay and should be encouraged that the applicant should remove, rotate, reduce the number of blade signs, as long as I'm sure if we approved it, we did so with the provision that the signs were attached to the grout. And that here in this building, a very beautiful grout, red, blending, lovely that the patching be done in a sympathetic manner. But I think that the notion that just because I have it, I've not used it, is really not a very good rationale for doing stuff in the start. I think the goal should be to minimize the signage, like Diana said, to that which serves the purpose of the sign, which is to announce the store and direct. And this has got great.
Okay. All right, so we've had a lot of comments and a lot of suggestions today. So we won't take any action, and we'll ask you to rethink the sort of collective set of ideas on how you can rethink the quantity and the variety and sort of prioritize and the hierarchy. So sort of thinking of quantity, variety, and hierarchy in a way that would be most beneficial to explore and engaging the public. So we won't take an action. We'll ask you to think about different options and come back to us and continue to work with Anu. And I do want to say that Anu didn't have a speaking role today, but she has been working very closely with the applicants. And this is also her first presentation to us at the commission. She's also been with us several months. She came from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, working on very interesting on water infrastructure projects and Section 106 review. So she brings unique expertise to the staff, and we're delighted to have you. So thank you. So please continue to work with Anu, and we'll see you back when you're ready. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
The next item is item number 5, docket number LPC 24-07381, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1392, lots 11 and 111. This is 15 through 17 East 77th Street in the Upper East Side Historic District. A neo-Grec style row house at number 15, designed by John G. Prague and built in 1878 and altered by Robert W. Gibson in 1895. And a neo-Grec style row house at number 17, designed by John G. Prague and built in 1878 and altered in 1952. The application is to modify the front areaways and install fencing, replace windows, construct rooftop and rear yard additions, and excavate the basement and rear yards.
Good morning, Commissioners. Erin Ruley, Higgins, Quaysbarth and Partners. We're here today with 15 to 17 East 77th Street. I'm joined by Stephen Harris and Abir Ahmad of Stephen Harris Architects. I'm going to take you through some of the history and context. Some of the history and context, and then Abir will walk you through the proposed design, and Stephen will be here for any questions or discussion you might want to have. So let's jump in. We have 15 and 17 are 2 buildings on the north side of East 77th Street within the Upper East Side Historic District, located between 5th Avenue and Madison. And these were two buildings of an original row of 3 constructed in 1878 and designed by John G. Prague. Neo-Grec in style. The third in the row is what we see sort of outside of the frame on the right, and that has been substantially altered row house in the early 20th century. So here we have our proposed scope of work. So we'll be restoring the front facade. The 2 buildings have a distinct ornamental character to each, and all of that character will be retained. The scope of work includes, we'll talk a little bit about the proposed brownstone finish, the color of that finish, the new, combining the areaways at the ground floor, new railing, consistent railing across both of the buildings, new 2/2 windows, which are a typical window configuration for neo-Grec buildings. And then up at the rooftop, we have an addition of mechanical units and bulkheads. None of that will be visible. The only thing that will be visible is one chimney that needs to be extended on a neighboring building. And then as we flip around to the rear, again, none of this is visible. What we're proposing here is an addition and a redesign of the rear facade. And this removes a collection of additions that had been added over time to the buildings and then opens up the rear yard. And we'll see that in the existing condition. And in thinking about how a project like this might be appropriate, we have looked at both the history of the buildings and the context in general. There's a long history of change here, both at the buildings and the block, and that there is this historical and physical context that might provide for an opportunity to have a new significant layer to these buildings. These buildings are not part of an intact row. And there's a great variety within the block of comparable additions that we'll be taking a look at. And so as we've been thinking about this, we really view this as a substantial new layer with real integrity that reflects both the history and evolution of the block, but does so in a distinctly contemporary way and interprets the previous history and the existing formal characteristics of the building. And it also builds on the model of early 20th century alterations to buildings that we'll be taking a look at. In 2014, the commission approved a project here to combine the buildings. So 15 and 17, 2014 approval included joining the buildings, restoring the facades, combining the areaway, and creating a new railing across the two facades. And at the back, extending out the rear plane. It extends out to the same point that we're proposing today. There was also a one-story greenhouse approved and then a rooftop addition as part of that as well. That project never proceeded, and the building is under new ownership. And so here we have the existing buildings today. Here's the real distinction between the two buildings is at the oriel window, where you can see that there's a slightly different decorative theme to each of the oriels. And on the number 15 is on the left, 17 is on the right. They've both been coated, charged over time, and we'll look at some of that in more detail. At the ground floor, the base of the buildings, we have all non-historic cladding at the areaway and along the cheek walls and steps. There was a significant alteration in the 1890s, removing the stoop and adding this highly ornamental entry surround that will be retained. This is a sandstone surround. It's not brownstone like the rest of the facade. And the proposal is to match the existing finish of the surround. You'll see in the historic photos that there was what appears to be a consistent finish to the building at that time. And so we think that what we're looking at here are just generations of coating that has differentiated the existing fabric from the historic stone surround. We have ironwork at the entryway. There's also a grill that occupies this window. This all dates to around 1940 at number 15. And then at number 17, there's some later changes, including this taller fence, and all of the existing areaway fabric is probably the last 20 years or so. Just to give you a sense of what the rear looks like currently, we have the two buildings here at the center. As I mentioned, it was the original row included number 19, and this is number 19 here. And so that received, both of the flanking buildings actually had extensive alterations in the early 2000s, approved by the commission, but you can see full height extension. And it's not just the massing of these additions that draws our eye, but really the design character of each of them. And we see this throughout the block, that there is really a very specific and individualistic design direction for each of the buildings. At our subject buildings, 15 and 17, we have a couple of generations of rear yard extension, and the rear facades have been coated and painted over time. And just as a point of reference, we're proposing to bring the rear facade out to the plane of this building here, which is also the point of that 2014 approval. So just to step back and take a look at the history of it, we have these great photographs from 1912 that give us a good sense of what the buildings looked like historically. In 1895, this was number 15 was altered. It was a very early alteration for the removal of a stoop and the addition of that entry surround. That was an architect owned the building, Robert Smith. That sounds right. Robert Gibson, sorry about that. And this was his home and his design. And so we can see here we had the entry surround, double leaf doors at the opening, and then a brownstone areaway wall that looks consistent with probably what was happening in the 1890s alteration. and an earlier generation of ironwork on the basement window. At number 17, it is still wholly intact at that point. This stoop is in place and all of its neo-Grec ironwork. By the 1940 tax photo, we can see that those double leaf doors have been replaced. We have a new metal and glass door. This likely coincides with alteration to multifamily house in the late 1930s, and then new ironwork at the areaway as well. The stoop is still intact at number 17 at this point, and that goes away in 1952 when the building's converted for multifamily use. Just to give you a sense of how the block evolved, we have the original condition when the three buildings were constructed in on the top left in the 1890s map. And then by the time of that 1895 alteration, which is reflected in this 1896 map, you can see there, as part of it, there was a one-story extension. So that's the sort of the first layer of what exists in the rear yard currently. By 1911, we start to see changes primarily at the avenues where the footprints are getting more extensive and developed, but certainly by the 1930s, really substantial change. This is the introduction of large-scale buildings on the avenues. We have 965th Avenue, which occupies a full quarter of the block, and then this is now what becomes the Mark Hotel directly to the east of us. And you can see as part of those 1912 alterations to the flanking buildings, 15 and 17 are now set back from the plane of the flanking buildings. So the 1912 alterations to numbers 13 and 19 extend all the way out to the property line. And then, so now 15 and 17 are sort of set back within that nook. And this is what the context looks like today. It is quite diverse in scale and type. 965th Avenue is on our left, the Mark is on our right, and then a whole host of really assertive additions have been approved within this block context. And it's not just in terms of scale, but it's materiality and design that we'll be looking at. So here, just looking at the specifics, this is our neighboring buildings, numbers 19 and 13. And just, this is, I know Fred Metzger had his first hearing earlier today. My first project at Higgins and Quaysworth was with Fred with Rick Cook. And this is a Rick Cook design on the left. And from 2000, and so it's quite funny, I think. But this, number 19 with this gabled roof, and again our neighbor at 13 with the double story oriel window. And to the west of that, we see a full height. This is a decorative elevator shaft that runs the full height and really just sort of breaks into the row. So again, no, there's no reading of the things that we typically look for in a row context, that we're not seeing any of that occur here. And again, lots of ornamentation and details that are not consistent necessarily with what's happening at the front of the buildings. Moving to the north side of the block, so just across the yard from us, and we can see on the left in the axons the massing that it's been diagrammed. So everything that is that sort of chartreuse color is everything that is 6 stories in height. So everything's had full height rear yard extensions and rooftop additions as part of their approvals. Most notably, number 12 East 78th. A full height rear yard extension, very assertive contemporary design by Annabelle Seldorf, approved in 2010, and this connects to the rooftop addition beyond that. It's clad in a light gray stucco with a large aperture, fully glazed aperture in the center. Adjacent to that is 14 East 78th Street. This is NYU's Center for Conservation. It's part of the Institute of Fine Arts. And if we look at the axon, it has a wedding cake massing that rises up to 10 stories in our mid-block. And so this was approved by the commission in 1979. It is magnificent. If you ever get to see this in elevation, it's fantastic, but it's not visible from the street. Really carefully done, designed by Michael Forstall. And then finally, a very recent approval by the commission in 2020, full height rear yard extension at number 26 East 78th Street with the rooftop addition broken into these three sculptural north-facing windows along the rooftop and connecting back to the rear yard addition. And so then just thinking about how this connects to what we see throughout the district historically, the altered row houses weren't just modifying the plane of the front facade and the style and character of the front facade, but this was also happening, it was a holistic change. Expanding at the rear and expanding at the roof. And so here are just three examples that give you a sense of what was happening. So we see, looking at just 5 East 63rd Street as an example, going from the 4-story massing to a full 5 stories, the rear wall extends back and includes the full height of the added mansard. And then we have other examples of this, but this is fairly consistent in how these buildings evolved over time. So it was not just focused on the front facade. We see those three buildings here in existing conditions, and you'll notice that each of those had a studio window integrated, including 5 East 63rd, which you see that sort of large scale north-facing window on the rear facade. And then finally, that concept of the holistic approach, we see so many of these projects which are really just focused on the front facade where the stoops have been removed and we now have basement entries. But so what that did was that it turned the basements into the public floor. Prior to that, that was not a public floor. And they moved the public rooms to the rear, and we see this in the plans. So they moved the public rooms to the back of the building, enlarged the window openings, and then activated the gardens. Before this, it was the rear yards were utilitarian, laundry, workspace, and this is the first time where the buildings are sort of inverted and turned toward the back. And I think what we're looking at is very much in the spirit of that, enlarged openings, a specific character to the facade, a light palette of materials that have an eclectic use of style and ornamentation, and really trying to understand what's happening here to help inform how to do something maybe extraordinary in our context. And so I think with that, I'll pass the presentation to Abir.
Thank you, Amy. Before I continue, I'm Abir from Stephen Harris. All right. Let's front and back. All right. We did start with front facade. So on the screen, you have the existing front facade. We have massive copies of our proposal. We apologize if for some reason the image got desaturated when we sent it, so we don't want you to miss out on any of the details. So our proposed facade, as Aaron has already mentioned, we are proposing to restore the brownstone throughout. We are restoring the front cornices. We are restoring the existing ironwork at number 15 and creating a new for number 15 and creating a new simpler painted wood door at number 17. We'll get into more detail talking about the ironwood in the next few slides, but I also wanted to use this as an opportunity to point out that the rooftop addition and the stair bulkhead that you see up above, as well as the railing on that sort of top roof garden, are not visible from public right of way. What is visible is that one chimney element that you see on the top right. That's a neighbor's chimney that will need to be raised 3 feet higher than our proposed rooftop addition. We're also proposing to replace all the windows with more energy efficient, sort of historically profiled wood windows that are going to be painted a dark gray. So getting into details of the areaway, the image on the top is the existing configuration, and our proposal is at the bottom. We're proposing to eliminate the cheek wall and the associated sort of ironwork between it, unify the areaway with larger bluestone, pull the steps down to the areaway at number 17 to align them with what's happening at number 15, and sort of unify all of this with new areaway railing, new areaway fence and gate spot. Something that's not sort of clear immediately in this image is that we are proposing to set back the decorative ironwork at number 15, the door surround. We're proposing to push it in ever so slightly in order to accommodate intercoms, cameras, things of the sort that will not be visible from the front in that case. And I'll show you drawings of that. We are also proposing very discrete planters with trash enclosures concealed below them. And again, we'll show the sections. So here's our proposal for the areaway. Top right, you can sort of see the railing at number 15. Bottom right is the very tall sort of areaway fence at number 17. Our proposal is to lower the areaway fence at number 17 so that it's more in line with the areaway fences that we see sort of that are prevalent actually on this particular block. And we would extend that character then over to number 15 and add another areaway gate, sort of simplifying the reading through the street. These are the precedents on the same block. As you can see, sort of very much in keeping with what we're proposing. Section through our areaway. We are proposing to eliminate the decorative ironwork at the basement windows. That appears to be sort of the current configuration in 50% of houses on the block. And we're proposing to sort of tidy up all the louvered sort of enclosures that you see below the basement windows. The image on the bottom right starts to talk about what's currently there. And obviously, we would infill that in with a new louver and sort of align it with the sides of the basement windows. You also get a close-up of the ironwork at the front door here, and that's the door we were proposing to sort of push back sort of slightly in plane inwards. This also illustrates the new painted wood door at number 17 that we're proposing. So in a lot of ways, we're creating the sense of hierarchy, taking what's sort of most exceptional about both houses and sort of sort of signifying sort of difference between the two. The image also shows the decorative brownstone panels below the parlor windows. We are restoring what's currently there on number 15 and recreating based on the tax photo the same detail at number 17. Sections through the areaway. Top right sort of shows our proposals at the typical sort of areaway window. You get a sense of the trash enclosures here with the planter above. On the bottom right, you get a sense of what that door, decorative metal door, will feel like once it's pushed in ever so slightly. You can sort of catch a glimpse of the areaways, cameras, and sort of lighting that will be incorporated in the head there. This also talks about the new areaway fence that you sort of cap in elevation. Again, another section through the secondary door showing the kinds of devices we're planning, and all very discreet and complementing brownstone. Okay, so before we get into talking about the rear, I just wanted to reemphasize, the point that Aaron was trying to make earlier, which is this is a very unusual block. It's a very unusual block because of the context, because of the scale of the gestures around, and of course, because of the individual expressions and, attention to design. And so, that is the context, that we are inserting our proposal into. The existing houses, as you can see there, have some pretty aggressive, additions at the rear that really cut down on the amount of light in those rear yards. So here's our proposal. We are proposing a 5-story limestone addition that extends up to the height of the existing cornice and sort of steps out in plane up to the 30-foot rear yard setback. So as Erin had mentioned earlier, it will align with the building to our right. We are then proposing to cap it with a north-facing artist skylight, which would have zinc-coated copper sort of sides there. It would be a painted steel window system. So everything that's happening on the limestone facade would have bronze windows, we're proposing white bronze windows, and that would sort of extend into the balcony elements and the deck that you read at the parlor floor. We have made an effort to distinguish between the two houses in a number of ways. That starts at the top with the split cornice. In this case, it would be a split limestone cornice, but follow the profile of sort of the split brick cornices that we're very used to seeing on these houses. And then we are expressing sort of that leader, from the gutter that would extend down the length of the house up to the steel deck. We've taken our cues from what's happening on the front facade, where there's this interesting distinction between the two oriel sort of bay windows. In our case, we do our version of that on the second floor, where on the left, we have an inset bay window on the second floor, and on the right, we have sort of a larger sort of opening with a balcony. Similarly, at the parlor floor on the left, we've introduced a spiral staircase to sort of, again, distinguish the two sides. Everything that you see on the lowest level, the garden level, really is not visible from anywhere. What's unique about these rear yards is they have very tall pre-existing masonry walls, so it's very, very difficult to get a sense of, what your neighbors look like on those lower floors. Equipment that you see up top in the stair bulkhead, not visible from the public right-of-way again. In terms of north-facing skylights, the image on the left is actually across from us, diagonally across from us on 77th Street. So this is a very common feature in the neighborhood that we're just sort of, we're taking cues from. So here's what the rear facade feels like in the context. And I think those earlier bird's eye views really give you a sense of how large the two buildings at the corner, the Mark and, the large apartment complex on Fifth Ave are, and how they really do sort of loom over any other sort of gesture. I think this image also speaks a good deal about the variety and the distinct styles that you see, in those houses at the rear, with the very designed double height bay window to our right, the gabled extension on our left. Also notice how that does sort of project at least 6 feet sort of proud of our facade. And then the extended, very design ornamental sort of chimney mass that Erin had spoken about. So a lot of variety that we are responding to. Section through the building. What's interesting is the dotted blue line actually describes the projection, well, the existing massing and the projection of the additions into the rear yard. We are also proposing to excavate a good deal of the rear yard. You can sort of get a sense from this of how deep we're going. We are pulling back the extension 5 feet from the property line at the rear, which is sort of fairly typical. We've submitted all the technical information, geotech, exploration, design, and surveys of the existing conditions. So I think that's all being reviewed. I also wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about the rooftop addition. As you can see there, none of what we're showing is visible from the street. And I think that's a factor of, the fact that we have a very narrow street. The only thing you do catch a glimpse of are those chimneys, where you see that diagonal line intersect the chimneys. That's a series of sort of 5 flues that will need to be extended 3 feet higher than our proposed roof. So again, looking at the rear yards, just again wanted to give you a sense of what our proposal on the right will feel like relative to what is currently there. What's currently there is really choppy and I think sort of really cuts down on the light for the entire block, really. Next, the existing roof condition. This is just showing our proposal. You can sort of see this is showing the equipment at the rear on the right, the chimney and elevator bulkhead in the center, and on the bottom left side, you can sort of see that chimney mass that I've sort of described that will start to become ever so slightly visible. So there is going to be a roof terrace at the front and above the rooftop addition. So here are photos of the mock-up. The yellow highlighted note calls out the chimney extension that will start to become visible. Here is the context from the street then. And really, it's not until you get to view C, which is sort of closer to the Madison Avenue side, where you start to catch a glimpse of that mock-up. Here is what it will then feel like. Very discreet and sort of, when viewed against the mansard roof, sort of really, you don't really notice it much. So we have details basically in the circles on the right. And in conclusion, just wanted to put our proposals to the front and the rear side by side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions, commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Chu?
Could you just clarify what is the existing facades of 15 and 17 are different colors? Has 17 been refinished, repainted?
Yes, 17 has been coated and painted, and 15 has 4 shades of brown, various generations of harging, patching.
Over
and
the old
painting.
brownstone?
Yes, exactly.
And but originally the pictures suggest they were both the similar
They were,
brownstone.
yeah, they were similar, and I think in the 1912, we'll just maybe jump to that really quickly. You can see with the 1895 entry surround, it was fairly consistent across all of the material reads consistent. The entry surround with the adjacent brownstone as well.
The entry surround was mentioned as sandstone, not brownstone?
Yes.
So it's a different material. How was the proposal to refinish? I didn't quite understand what was happening to it.
Nothing's happening to that.
Okay.
It's the only thing that's not coated really on the facade. There are a couple of areas that have spalled on the existing brownstone, but the rest of the brownstone has been covered. So the entry surround will be cleaned, and then the brownstone will be resurfaced on the main plane of the facade, and that would be the finish color of the brownstone would be consistent with the cleaned masonry of the entry surround.
Oh, I see. You're just cleaning the entry surround. I
Yes,
understood.
but that's going to sort of lead to the selection of the color finish, the shade of brown that the brownstone is finished on the overall facade.
Okay, you're using that as your
As the
driver.
basis. Exactly.
All right, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Master.
There's a beautiful, the stone door surround in the rear. And you said you were retaining that. What are you doing with that
The stone,
in the rear facade?
no.
I guess what's happening to the existing stone door surround on the rear facade?
There's no stone surround on the rear.
On 15?
whole rear
Oh,
is-
is that something else?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
The-
Oh, okay.
The whole rear is being replaced with
Right, right.
the new elevation. That stone surround is right here. That's
In the front?
facade.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the sort of centerpiece of the restorative program.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, other questions? All right, let's see if we have public testimony. Noting that there is no one in the room, I will turn it over to Gregory Kala to see if we have any remote participants.
Thank you, Chair Carroll. We have a couple of hands raised in the attendees list. The first being Zainab Turan from the Friends of the Upper East Side. Zainab Turan, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Chair Carroll and Commissioners, I'm Zainab Turan speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. Friends Preservation Committee firstly applauds applicants' efforts into researching the historic character of both row houses and the immediate urban fabric with the aim of preserving the original character. We like that the facade restoration would retain the individual reading of the row houses in both front and the rear facades, except the basement and the new rooftop studio levels, and that the height of the new fencing will be lowered to match the previously modified version. We also appreciate the efforts to remove the existing rear extension to provide more open space in the back and the choice of materials, namely limestone cladding, white bronze, window frames, and zinc-coated copper cladding and proportions in the back facade. However, this proposal still presents an increased risk to the building due to the demolition and excavation. We urge applicants to closely monitor the demolition and reconstruction, making sure the approved plans are followed and the structural integrity and historic character of these two row houses remain intact. We also trust the owner to keep the neighbors in the loop about the proposed schedule and take every precaution to minimize the environmental disturbance. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next up, we'll be hearing from Lucy Levine from the Historic Districts Council. Lucy Levine, I am promoting you to panelist right now. Please unmute your line and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners. My name is Lucy Levine. I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this proposal sensitive. We typically prefer to see the top 2 floors of any rear wall preserved, but given the overall assemblage and context of this site, we find the proposed rear bulk to be appropriate. Because the applicant is already doing such a lovely restorative work, we ask that they also consider recreating the building's original scalloped acroteria. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I do not see any further hands raised in the attendees list, so I will note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 8 recommends approval, and I will bring it back to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to respond to the few comments we've heard? I know it was largely supportive. There were a few thoughts. Okay.
Yeah, it's great to see so much support for the project. The question raised by Friends, demolition and excavation, yes, absolutely. We've all of the standard requirements have been submitted to staff. It's all part of our package. It's Stephen always has an amazing team that he works with, and they all have a long history with very successful projects of this type. So everybody is quite secure in the approach here. The acroteria, we'll take a look at it. It is a nice detail, and we can certainly consider that. But otherwise,
okay. Commissioners, any final questions? All right, then let's move to our discussion. Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so we'll begin our discussion, and just quickly for context, and I think Aaron covered a lot of this as well, but we know that on the Upper East Side, when the row houses that were constructed in the 19th century were redeveloped in the early 20th century, that is a layer that we've considered a significant layer, and it often resulted in removal of stripping facades or adding classical detail to facades, and then, as Aaron described, often also included entirely new facades pushed out to the property line and significant additions at the back. And so the commission has always considered this in thinking about particularly rear yard additions and changes to front facades. And so in this particular block, we have a very developed block that represents all these layers, including large apartment buildings and some very significant rear yard additions that happened over time, and in some cases with LPC approval, sort of based on the historic expansion of these buildings in the back. In fact, the commission previously approved a new full height rear yard addition at the plane that is being proposed today. So the proposal includes at the front facade, removing all the coated and parged stucco face on the brownstone facades and resurfacing them with a sandstone finished material that will match the historic door surround at the basement level. It also includes areaway alterations, including removing some ironwork at the basement level windows to open those up, restoring decorative panels, and installing a continuous fence which is at a 6-foot height above a 6-inch curb, which is lower than what is currently at number 17. And the applicant showed examples of others of a similar height in the block. And finally, there is the excavation at the rear yard. They are pulling it back 5 feet from the rear property line, which is typical of what we have approved when we have approved excavation beneath the rear yard to allow for some substantial planting to remain. And this project is also going to be going through an enhanced engineering review through our process, and will be referred to DOB for that review, which happens prior to our issuing the permit. So with that context, we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this one?
Sure. I'm going to go through all the items one by one. I think that overall, the mass and bulk of the addition to the rear I find acceptable, and I do think it's respectful to the and sensitive to the adjacent facades and their additions. So I feel comfortable with that. In terms of the entry, I think the new ironwork defining and unifying the two lots is appropriate, assuming that that is not historic material. It's all new. I am not comfortable with the removal of the ironwork at the window on 15, as well as the lower apron ornamental ironwork. I think that I'd like to ask the applicant to look at ways of keeping that in their design, which I think is definitely achievable. The sight line in terms of the street and the impact on the top, I think is very minimal. The flue extension, which I understand is required by code to go up higher, I think is relatively minimal due to the scale of this specific block. These are very small elements of bigger nature. Yeah, I think ultimately, just to summarize, my concerns are really about retaining the ironwork at the window and apron.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Master?
I agree with Commissioner Chu.
All right. Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, you know, normally I look to see try to memorialize the sense of two buildings here, but originally this building, was the way it was constructed as a pair. It looks from pictures that it's presented almost as a single building. So I agree with Commissioner Chu remarks on this.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum? Or we have done it when the brownstone's been in very bad repair. And oftentimes when people have asked us to replace the brownstone, they've asked for limestone, and we have typically approved a sandstone color in lieu of that. Yeah.
Well, the issue is really about the style of the house, general volumetric presentation of the house. Front, I think the front facade design under struggle viewers. It's not because textual that's one consider done with that. B, probably up towards facing volume. One of the main reasons why we have work of the historic building and visible is to allow for a read of that historic building. I think that here, even though the context certainly supported maybe attention to the volume of the building is important. So I would go to the west top floor was at the original plane of the building and step back, no problem.
Okay. Okay. And I appreciate that. I think the Upper East Side Historic District is one place where we have allowed for full height extensions because of the historic context of these rear yards. But appreciate your concerns. Commissioner Ginsburg?
I agree with Commissioner Chu, and with the retaining of the ironwork at the window, find this approvable.
Okay. Commissioner Chen?
It's the same with me. I have no problem with the rear yard. I think the original grill work on the front, number 15, that should be retained. And I'm glad you brought up that they will be going through enhanced engineering with DOB on the excavation, given context.
And Commissioner Lutfi?
This is really it's a lovely project. And it's so nice that the facades are going to be parged and restored. And I don't know that we're approving the windows, but on the front, but I think the 2/2s work well, even though they don't seem to be original. I think the entryway at the bottom, emphasizing, the front door and the sort of making a plainer secondary door works very well, but doesn't detract in any way from what's going on visually. And I think the fence is beautiful. I do think it would be nice to retain the apron over the window at the base. I think the back of the building, so amazing when you look at what was here. It was sort of a mess. And the fact that one extension is pulled back, and I appreciate the uniformity of this facade. There's been so much change in the rear yard area, and with the two very tall buildings on either side, I feel like this works very well. I think it's respectful, even though we lose the top floor and we add this artist studio window, which is quite attractive. I think overall the effect is positive. And as you said, Sarah, we do approve full height extensions on the Upper East Side. So I feel comfortable with it and can approve this.
I think it's sort of interesting. They sort of kept a 19th century vocabulary
Yeah.
for the proportions and details, which
agree.
I think is a nice gesture in this very varied context. Okay, so I think we have enough to support this as is, with the recommendation or the requirement that they maintain the ironwork and apron at the basement level. Commissioner Chu, would you make that motion?
In the case of LPC 2407, 381, 15, and 17 East 77th Street in Upper East Side Historic District, a neo-Grec style row house number 15 designed by John G. Prague and built in 1878 and altered by Robert W. Gibson in 1895, and a neo-Grec style row house number 17 designed by John Prague and built in 1878 and altered in 1952. Application is to modify the front areaways, install a fence, replace windows, construct rooftop, rear yard additions, and excavate the basements of the rear yards. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper East Side Historic District. Further note that the two properties were originally constructed as two of a row of three neo-Grec style brownstone road houses that have been altered and combined into one tax lot and are being combined internally. I recommend approval, finding that the combining of the two row houses whose lower facades and areaways were altered prior to designation with the removal of the stoops will maintain the two independent ground floor entrances and their reading as two buildings, that both areaways are altered and that the materials and fencing to be removed are non-historic, and that the combined areaway featuring two sets of stairs, integrated lighting at select locations, bluestone pavers, integrated in enclosures concealed with planters and decorative ironwork railings and gates will harmonize with the variety of areaway treatments found in the streetscape. That the through wall louvers below the basement windows will be discrete and rational in terms of symmetry and will match the finish of the windows. That although the proposed 2/2 windows are not the original configuration to the buildings, the configuration is typical of other neo-Grec style buildings throughout the city, and that the multi-light windows will harmonize with the multi-light windows of the altered colonial revival style facades that bookend the row. That the proposed rooftop and rear yard additions will not be visible from any public thoroughfares. That the existing brick rear north facades have been coated, and that the removal of these facades returns and the extension at number 15 will not cause the loss of any significant architectural features. That the proposed rear yard addition, which will span full width across the buildings, will not extend out as far as the existing rear extension or the adjacent rear yard extension at number 19, and will increase the openness in the central green space, which is highly built up and has already been substantially diminished by the large apartment buildings and large rear additions that make up much of the block. That the proposed rear height, the full height rear addition will be in keeping with the presence of other full height additions in the row in the back, and that the proposed design features masonry up to the historic cornice line and includes a punch windows and corbelled cornice that will recall the original top floors while maintaining a relationship with the adjacent altered row houses. That the simple, modern, and holistic design of the proposed rear additions featuring limestone cladding with the vertical joint at the division and other variations between the buildings will maintain the scale and character of two independent row houses and still read as secondary and subservient facades, and will be consistent with the evolution of Upper East Side row houses, which have been expanded and redesigned over time. That the proposed one-story rooftop addition featuring zinc-coated copper cladding and multi-light glazing assembly spanning the two buildings will resemble an artist studio skylight and will be in keeping with green light skylights and greenhouse type rooftop additions sometimes found on row houses in this historic district. That the excavation of the cellar and rear yard and internal structural work will be done in compliance with the Department of Buildings regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer to protect this building and adjacent buildings. That the proposed excavation of the rear yard will be set back 5 feet from the property line, allowing for substantial plantings, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or the Upper East Side Historic District, and that the applicant will work with the staff on retaining the decorative wrought iron window and apron security grille at number 15.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Master, would you second that motion?
Second.
Right, and Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu?
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg?
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Nope.
Commissioner Lutfi?
Aye.
Commissioner Master?
Aye.
With 7 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved with that one modification. Please continue to work with the staff. Good luck. Thank you. All right, so that concludes our morning session. We will now break for lunch and we'll return at 1:15. And we'll ask all members of the public to leave the hearing room, and we'll ask all members of the public to voluntarily exit the Zoom at this time, so that should you wish to rejoin the meeting at 1:15, you don't have technical difficulties that might arise if we have to remove you.